Hello everybody, it's oil change time on my 997 Turbo, and I'm going to show you which steps you need to go through to do an oil change on your 997 Turbo by yourself and not overpay at the Porsche dealership. So let's see first what kind of tools and things we need to do the oil change. So at first we have all kinds of different rings to seal all the screws back up again. The copper ring is for the oil tank itself. Then there is an aluminium ring, I believe, for the crankcase. And then we have the very small rubber rings that go inside the oil filter housing, which many shops leave out or forget. Then you need obviously an oil filter, and that usually comes also with a new seal for the oil filter housing. Then to unscrew the oil filter housing, we need a special adapter that goes onto the oil filter housing, and then you unscrew it either with a 27mm wrench right here or with a nut. I prefer the 27mm nut because you also will need that later on when we screw back in the oil filter housing with a new oil filter with our torque wrench, which we have in here. And then obviously you need some kind of oil because my 997 Turbo is quite old right now. I'm using this 10W60, which was recommended to me by one of the most renowned Porsche 997 Turbo tuners in Germany, and which I'm running since about 10,000 kilometers, and I'm really quite happy. The car has some small oil leaks, or had some small oil leaks. They all gone away since I'm running this oil. Also, oil consumption has gone down, and I'm driving the car quite frequently on the Autobahn at high speeds with high oil temperatures. I think this oil is ideal. Also for track driving, I sometimes take this car to the Nordschleife, so I think this is the ideal setup for me. So let's get started, let's get under the car and see what we need to do. So now we're going to take a look underneath the car and which bolts we need to undo. One thing I forgot to mention before was that I had a car jack to jack up the car and put it on some stones to get it off the ground a bit, but I would highly recommend using a lift for this, but this is like the garage edition. So this is how we are rolling now. So the first bolt we are going to undo is the crankcase one. You can see it right there. It's the big one that's standing out a bit. So this is where I guess about 1 liter of engine oil is going to come out of the glorious M9770 Turbo Metzger engine. And then the second bolt we are going to undo is right there. I hope you can see it and I can get it in focus. It's this one. It's the oil tank, which holds most of the oil. I expect to about 5 to 6 liters of oil coming out there with pretty high pressure, to be honest. So be careful when you unscrew it because it can be very messy when you don't take the bolt out quick enough and the oil that's shooting out hits the bolt and goes absolutely everywhere. One special thing to note is that you need the 27mm wrench to counter this 19mm bolt because the oil tank is pretty thin, and if you don't counter it, you might crack the oil tank, and that then requires an engine out repair and is I assume it's a real big pain in the ass to fix. So make sure you have both the 27mm bolt to counter it up here and then undo the bolt down here. Alright, let's start with the first bolt. I got my trusty oil container here that will hopefully catch all the oil coming out. Just undo it like this. And then unscrew it with the fingers. While I'm screwing it out, I'm keeping pressure on the bolt so it won't fall out. There I can see the first oil dripping. And now I'm going to release the bolt, and there the oil comes. Nice. So you see the oil has drained from the crankcase and there's only a slight dribble still coming out. I left this standing for about 5 minutes. So here you see our drain bolt with the washer on it, the aluminium washer. This is the old one. Will the camera focus that closely? I'm not sure. You can definitely see marks from where it was crushed between the bolt and the crankcase. And there we see the new one that is still very shiny in comparison and has no marks on the surface from being crushed between the two metal parts and sealing them. So the original manual also requires you to do 2 more bolts which sit in these catch tanks for the turbochargers, and they hold a couple of milliliters, maybe 100 milliliters of oil, and I'm usually not bothering with these because I don't want to mess with the turbochargers too much and put too much movement into this part, and also it's so little oil, it really doesn't make much of a difference if you leave it in. Just do your oil changes regularly and you should be fine. Full disclaimer here, I'm not a mechanic or anything, I'm just a very interested hobbyist, and if you happen to work on your own car and it goes wrong, you're responsible. But I think it's a manageable risk here, and so far I have not had problems with this method of changing the oil. Now we come to the part where you have to be a bit more careful undoing the bolt on the oil tank. You put on the 27 millimeter and then you counter the nut. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a bad angle here, and while loosening the nut on the oil tank, I knocked over the camera and forgot to film the rest of draining the oil from the oil tank. Alright, so after putting our 2 drain bolts in, we are now going to take out the oil filter, which sits here in the oil filter housing on the left side of the engine. Therefore we need this oil filter adapter that goes on like this, and then we need a wrench or something with a 27 millimeter nut to undo the oil filter housing. So when you loosen the oil filter housing here, you can see I can turn it now with my fingers. Make sure you have a place where you can put the old oil filter, and also I highly recommend having a cloth around here, because there, maybe you can see it down there, there's a bit of oil coming out. Generally it's quite well designed, so no oil should go on the engine, but just to make sure, have the rack here. There we have it. The oil filter just came out together with the housing, and you can see there's still some oil left in the lower part of the oil filter housing. You want to clean that out, obviously, and then you want to change the upper O-ring here. Maybe you can see it. There, the camera focus. Change this one and change the one down here. That comes with the new oil filter. No worries when your oil filter housing and this stem come apart. They are just clipped in here. It's no problem. Sometimes it comes out when you pull out the oil filter from this assembly. Also, I usually always check my oil filter for like metal shavings or anything in there to see whether there's a problem in the engine that might need addressing, and it's basically sending out signs like, I don't know, metal shavings or something, maybe some residue. So I replaced the O-rings, put the oil filter back on, and now it's going to go back into the housing. The first part I'm gonna screw with my hands. That sounds wrong. I'm screwing it in with my hands. Not screwing with my hands, sorry about that. And then for the last part I'm going to use the adapter. Where is it? It's over here. Gonna put that adapter on and use that torque wrench to torque it to 25 Newton meters, as it's also depicted right here on the oil filter housing cap. So last step of the oil change, just make sure you have all the drain plugs underneath the car all put in and tighten them, and then you're going to fill up the car on the oil filler neck on the right side. I like to use a funnel for that because otherwise it's really hard to get to the oil filler neck with the big oil can. You have to be a bit careful here because you don't have a dipstick like in other cars because of the dry sump system of the M9770 engine. So what you need to do, you put some in carefully. I usually put in about 6.5 liters, then turn on the car, let it warm up a bit, and then do the oil check in the dash and see how much I got left. Usually I then put in another liter or so. It really depends on how much came out. Ideally, you would measure how much came out. I can also judge a bit by picking up the old oil and seeing how heavy it is and comparing that to what I'm going to fill in. Hopefully not overfill the car, because if you overfill the engine with oil, what you will get is that lots of oil gets into the left-hand side of the intake, because the vent for the oil system goes into the left side or the driver's side of the engine, and then you will get lots of oil into the intake and also into the combustion chamber, and then you will get like a very smoky 997 turbo. So finally the car took 8 liters. As you can see, this jug, it took completely, and then 3 liters out of this. So in total 8 liters for the oil change, and now it's topped up and ready to go for another 10,000 kilometers. Thank you for watching. I hope I could bring you a bit of confidence to do the oil change on your 997 Turbo yourself, and I would be very happy if you subscribe for more 997 Turbo videos.